All right, hey there, how's everybody doing? Today's topic is the Nikkor AI 200mm f4 telephoto lens. This lens in this configuration was introduced in 1974 with the K series. The K series was that series of pre-AI lenses that had rubber focusing rings as opposed to the serrated metal focusing rings, which characterizes most of the pre-AI lenses. The optical formula is 5 elements in 5 groups. The prior lens, the pre-AI series, characterized in this focal length by the the pre-K series, pre-AI. The pre-AI series with metal focusing rings is a 4-element in 4-group design, which was then updated with the introduction of the K series. Essentially, if you're buying the 200mm f4 Nikkor, if it's got the rubber focusing ring, then it's got 5 elements, and if it's got the metal focusing ring, then it's got 4 elements. So optically, that's what you need to know. And they also all have this, I'm pretty sure all versions of this lens have the retractable lens hood. All right, so I bought this thing, Lord knows how long ago, 10, 15 years ago, and it sat on the shelf forever before I finally picked it up and started using it. And I bought it just because I didn't have anything in this focal length, and this one was cheap. So I picked it up, and I just hadn't thought about using it very much. It was just sort of one of the round out the collection kind of purchases, and I didn't think much of it. Well, in recent years, there may be, or at least now I think there's reason to start looking at the 200mm focal length, and in particular, 200mm f4 prime lenses in general, not merely this Nikkor. Because what we've got in the hobby collecting community for classic telephoto, or for classic manual focus lenses rather, the prices of short telephoto lenses, also known as portrait lenses, has really gone up. It's really increased. In most classic lens systems, you can get a good deal on a 50mm lens, you can get a good deal on a 135, but anything in between is going to be a little bit more pricey. That's certainly the case with Nikon, Pentax, and a number of other of the major brands and manufacturers as well. So why should we take a look at the 200mm f4 lenses? Aren't they sort of big and heavy? Well, kind of, yeah. And that's one of my prejudices, and one of the reasons I didn't use this thing for so long is because it is larger and heavier. And if we take a look at, for example, here's the Nikon or the Nikkor 135-2.8, and if we compare that to the 200mm f4, you can see that the 200mm is considerably larger. It's a nice chunk of metal and glass right there. So why bother? And the answer why bother is, well, number one, price, and number two, the laws of optics. So if your goal, if you're a hobby collector and you want to do the portraits with the blurry background thing, which has been so popular in recent years, and with good reasons. I'm not degrading that in any way. I do a lot of it. So most folks, when they think of doing the portrait shots with the big blurry backgrounds, immediately gravitate towards an 85 or maybe 100mm focal length and look for something with a really wide maximum aperture, and those tend to be very expensive. Well, don't forget your basic optical laws of optics, I guess. There are 3 factors which influence depth of field. Aperture is one of those factors. So is focal length, and so is distance to subject. So aperture and focal length are inherent attributes of the lens, and most people in the collector, or the classic lens collector community, are focusing on this factor, on the aperture, and they're looking for faster and faster glass, which is, well, it ain't cheap. You forget that you can compensate for slower aperture by increasing your focal length. That is, your depth of field of a 200mm f4 lens is going to be much narrower than the depth of field associated with a say a 135mm f4 or a 105 f4 or 85mm at f4. that you're going to produce significantly different depth of field. And it's worth looking at these things because they're not expensive. And when I say these things, I just mean 200 millimeter lenses in general. I mean, I'm very pleased with the Nikon, or the Nikkor rather. I'm very pleased with the results I got, and I'll put a link down to link down below to my album on Flickr, where I've collected about roughly 50 images I've shot with this lens. All of the portrait images in that album were shot at maximum aperture. And if you want a nice blurry, mushy black background, I challenge you to do better. I mean, take a look at that. It's really I've been quite impressed with what this lens can produce in terms of portrait shots at maximum aperture. For what these things go for in the U.S. market, you'll never find one of these for $100. I mean, that is, $100 would be like the maximum. Maybe an AIS series in mint condition, but I mean, these things, they're just not going for that much. They're really inexpensive because they're big and they're heavy, and at 200 millimeters, your ability to use it is somewhat restricted. I mean, you're not going to use this lens indoors, that's for doggone sure. And if you are shooting portraits outdoors, you need some room to work, because you've got to be able to do the proverbial, zoom with your sneakers kind of thing. So you're going to have to back up in order to get the framing you want in all likelihood. But if you're willing to operate within those constraints, or if you're capable of operating within those constraints, you can save a lot of money and get some really nice results by using a 200 millimeter lens, even at f4. Even at, and there are tons of these things out there, and they're not expensive. And here, let me give you a list. I made a list. Why don't I show it to you? So, for 200 millimeter f4 manual focus prime lenses for 35 millimeters, I made a little list. This is not exhaustive. I'm sure there are others, and if I left out your favorite one, I apologize. But here are some manufacturers or some sort that made a 200 millimeter f4 prime. Canon FD, both in the breech lock and the Canon new FD. Pentax SMC for K-mount, SMC Takumar for M42, Rokkor X by Minolta, the Zuiko series for the Olympus OM system. Contax Yashica mount. Yashica made one, and Contax Yashica mount. Contax made one, and Contax Yashica mount. That one may be a little, if I had to guess, I'd say that has a potential to be a little pricey, because it has Contax on it, and it's called a tele-tessar. So whenever you have words like tessar and Contax in the name of a product, that's going to drive up prices. And Konica AR. So if you're looking for that mushy background for your portrait shots, at least outdoors, this is a nice alternative. This is a you can probably buy 3 or 4 of these for the price that you would pay for a comparable fast portrait lens in the same system. So that's certainly true of Nikon. So have a look at the 200 millimeter focal lengths. Or the 200 millimeter lenses. Well, specifically, take a look at this one. But in general, if you're looking for that mushy background portrait look, consider 200 millimeter f4. It's not the sort of thing that would pop up in your mind if someone were to say to you, "Hey, which lens would you grab off the shelf to put a nice blurry background behind a portrait shoot?" This is probably not something that would jump, that leaps to mind first. And because of that, they're underpriced. So again, that's kind of the theme of the channel. That's kind of why I'm doing a lot of what I do, is get out there and get yourself a good system, and don't overpay for it. All right, those are my thoughts for the day. So if you enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe, and check out the links below, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.